Would you like to come out and see us? Come break your heart and put it back again. Or would you like to answer the questions of what we're wrong with women and men? Do you think that you could ever put it on the line? Do you think that you could even spare the time?
I love all the crazy conversations that I've gotten in planes over the years, and one in particular I really remember well because of what happened later. I had met a guy who was going into ministry. He's 35 and never done ministry as a businessman, and he was going to start this high school and reach out to this high school, and he knew no students there. And he sat down with me and asked me a few questions, and I told him a few things that I think could be helpful. But one thing I told him, I had not really told anybody specifically. I said, I want you to take a journal and write down students' names you meet, and then write down 10 things that you see in them that you think is good, and speak that to them. And he does this, and it was interesting. He calls me a couple months later. I'd forgotten all about the conversation, and he starts our conversation out with 247, and I'm like, barely remembering who the guy is, and he said, 247, I'm on 247, and I have a problem now, and you need to solve it. And I was like, okay, well, what's your problem? He goes, well, I did what you said. I wrote down the students' names, I prayed for them, and then I tried to speak things I saw in them. And I'm on number 247 now with more than 10 students, but all these students. But the problem is, my wife is mad at me now. And I was like, why is your wife mad at you? And he goes, they won't leave the house. The kids won't leave the house. They're there all the time, and we've got to set some kind of boundaries. And so we laughed and talked about the boundaries a little bit, and so on and so forth. But I was really blessed by him calling, and we ended up having this great conversation in which he told me stuff like, you wouldn't believe how many kids told me no one's ever said anything good to me in a year. Or, thanks for saying that, I didn't think anybody noticed. Or, man, I've been struggling so hard, and how so many times my dad never comes to any games of mine. All these things that I was just kind of taken aback by. And he said, just speaking this blessing. And so we talked about that a little bit, and what we talked about a little more was, it reminded me of Philippians, and Paul is sending them Timothy, and it says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send you Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about him. Listen to this. I have no one else like him who will show a genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interests, but not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with a father, he has served me in the work of the gospel. And Paul said, I have found he's like Jesus. And he equates being like Jesus as taking a genuine interest in others. And of course it has to be genuine. You don't tell a student who's a terrible basketball player he's the best basketball player you've ever seen. Or if you're disingenuous, no one will respond to that. But some of it is simple. Some of it is, I really just enjoy being with you. Or it's, you made a good hit in the third quarter. Or you really love your sister well. Or you're great at math. Or one is, I just like seeing you every day. And how little we speak this blessing over people. Over and over, we're just there's such a void of us speaking that kind of blessing. And God really calls us to speak that kind of blessing to one another. And the beauty of that. And it really takes some intention. He had to ask God, because some people, you have to really look hard when they're struggling to find something positive, and especially in adolescence. And he just said it was really good to be able to see students from God's lens, and it really helped him do that too. It was a great discipline for himself, much less a blessing. It's not about not avoiding the hard things in their life and being honest with people. That's going to come too in a relationship. But can we speak blessing? Well, every year with freshmen, the last 13 years, Brandon and I, another staff guy, we will talk about, we cannot wait till we get to John 13. It's our favorite lesson. And it's a lesson that is chock full of love and servant leadership and strength. And it's a very famous lesson. But Brandon and I kind of anticipate this 1 week. And it's probably after 6 months of knowing some freshmen where there's kind of a curve of us beginning to get to know each other. But we really hadn't totally gelled a lot of times. And we'll get to John 13. And we all know the story, and it says it's just before Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. This evening was in progress. The devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Iscariot. And it goes on to say that Jesus stands up, wraps a towel around his waist, and begins to wash all the disciples' feet. And first off, he's offering himself and willing to humble himself. I can't imagine 30 or 40 grown men doing this. I've had a lot of grown men Bible studies, and I've never done that with grown men. I think it'd be so awkward. But the truth is, this is Jesus says we're blessed if we do this. But we kind of end up taking the story to the next place. And I asked the question, what do you think God would say to you if he went one by one and we got to watch him speak to you and you and you and go around the circle to your best friends? I mean, how much would you give to hear what he'd say to your best friends? Without for a half a second thinking about what he'd say to you and being obsessed about that, thinking, what would he say to my wife, to my 2 boys? Matter of fact, I'd give $10,000 to know what he'd say to my wife. That would be amazing to know the words of Jesus specifically to my wife. Well, I asked this question, and inevitably people will say it's kind of a performance deal. You know, it's, well, he would say, have you been served me? Do you love me? What have you done for me lately? All these different things. And those kind of answers usually come up. And then almost every time there'll be a guy that says, he would say that he's got me and that I'm okay and that he likes this about me. And you can see kind of the spirit of the group change. And I've watched this so many times. I love this lesson. And then we kind of turn the corner on the conversation. I asked them if they've ever spoken the words of God to someone. And most of the time, these 18-year-old guys in the grass are picking grass and they're looking at me like, you're crazy. And God's words to people. And yet we begin to talk about it, and they begin to think about, yeah, I've said good things to people before, and I've blessed people before, and I've said something to someone like I care for you, and we begin to do that. And what inevitably happens is I offer them the chance to speak to each other in the group, and they begin to kind of mumble out a few things. And there's always a couple guys that are really pretty good at it, but you can tell they have not done it much. And it's fascinating to watch. And by the end of our time together, I see that they're saying things like, we should do this all the time. My mind's not right. I'm really judgmental towards people. I really am pretty harsh when I think about people instead of looking for the great things in them and speaking those things to them all the time. And I've noticed over the years, after 3 or 4 years with them, by the time we're doing it together 3 or 4 years later, they're unbelievable at it. I'll just say, hey, let's bless one another. Let's say something great today about each other. And their ability to just immediately do it and to begin to speak, and how we learn to practice that, and we practice it over and over, and it becomes part of who we are. And what a great way to disciple and care for others, because they're going to want to speak that to their children. They're going to want to speak that to their families, their wives, to their neighbors. And it's a little bit of an obedience thing again, but it's a beautiful thing, and to give them a chance and an opportunity to do that. I don't know how y'all seen that flesh out in y'all's life. Does anything come to mind when you hear 247?
I know that when I've kind of stepped out of my comfort zone and approached someone to speak something that I feel like God's told me about them, or to speak the things that I see that are good in them, that the whole spirit of the conversation changes, and it opens the door for like a very deep, much deeper relationship that just bears more fruit, because they realize, wow, like this person really actually cares about me. And when I think and reflect on friendships that I've had in the past, the deepest ones have been the ones where it was all about me serving them and calling out these good things in them and bringing that to light in them. And they naturally do that back in those sorts of relationships. And it's just, I don't know, it's amazing.
I mean, kind of what I go back to is, I don't even really consider myself super sentimental, but I do have a shoebox, full of these either notes, whether they're thank you notes or journal entries of times where people have either, spoken those kind of words over me, or just in a genuine way said, I really care about you in this way, or I see this in you. And the amount of times in my life where I've just come to some level of hardship, or any time where I can just open that shoebox and like read that stuff about myself, and how I've had to rely on that. Just the idea that you can take the time and handwrite something, or walk over to somebody and say something, and that it will actually stick with them, and they get to rely on that, because it's encouragement and truth is just so helpful and so full of life.
It's awesome.